So, I've had a couple conversations with Paul over a couple of years, and we are trying to change science at Harborlight. Keeping the Montessori base, remembering that Montessori developed her curriculum in the early 1900s, and that science is pretty different. And even teaching is very different. Actually, very different partly because of being informed by Montessori. So, bad news. We have a problem. This is a ranking according to the International Student Assessment, and the United States in science is about 24, behind almost every other industrialized nation in the world. All right? So, being a Montessori teacher, I tend to say, well, tests are tests, and they're interesting markers. They're valuable in some way, but they're not an end-all, be-all. So, I would give this a grain of salt, except that what we're hearing from industry is, you are not sending us people that can think. And that's the really scary part. They're not saying they can't learn. They're not saying they can't get the content. They're saying they can't think. So, perfect for Montessori to approach. Most Americans don't understand what science is. I was going to play a great movie, but Neil deGrasse talking about, I don't believe in global warming. I mean, somebody saying, I don't believe in global warming. Well, it's not a matter of belief. Science is empirical, and most people don't understand that. It's not optional whether you believe something or that's religious and probably political, but not science. So what we'd like to do is more and more talk about with our children, work with our children so that they understand the process of science. Because science is a way of looking at the world. And for what it does, it is the most successful way we have. We had a president that was pretty committed to improving education. I didn't agree with every program he suggested, but the approach and the commitment was pretty awesome. I like this. Critical way to understand and explore and engage with the world. That's exactly it. A way that works in the sense that we can test it. We have a hypothesis, we have an idea, we can test it. And then then my friend can test it, and his friend can test it. And with enough tests, we've got a pretty good idea of the nature of what we've just done. All right. So basically, I'm trying to approach my teaching in 4 ways: environment and materials and hands-on. That is Montessori. You know, that's what she brought to the table, and it hasn't gone away. Kids handling materials, kids putting their hands on things. It works. It works amazingly well. We add to that inquiry and project. Inquiry is the idea of bringing a question, a problem to kids and having them solve it. Now that's still in the context of a controlled environment. I'm not going to walk in and say, what are the stresses on that bridge you crossed this morning? But we can say, let's do a project. Let's design a bridge. And this was 22, 22, 22. 22 inches span, 22 sticks, has to hold 22 pounds. And it's a significant problem, huge problem. This was for Upper L. And they worked at it really hard. Now, the good thing about inquiry is kids want it. They have questions already. All you have to do is excite it. I had kids who walk around the science room because there's so much energy and so much, and they were focused like crazy. In fact, there were a group of 4 boys who are highly active that they made the successful bridge, the first one, 22 pounds. Project-based engineering, so that's obviously going to bring up the new idea, STEM. This was pushed, it's being pushed by industry a lot, and they're talking about science, technology, engineering, and math as an integrated whole. Okay. We're not there yet, but we want to be. The middle school math teacher, Tracy, and I are doing a map project in a couple weeks to talk to the middle schoolers about, she's doing ratios right now. And ratios, for some kids, are really hard to get. See, this relationship is the same as this, 2 to 4 is the same as 1 to 2, that they're the same ratio. It's not intuitively obvious to everybody. So maps are great for math because you're talking about ratios, scale, right? But we're also talking in science, so it's like, how do you map something? We're going to take a sphere, and thinking maybe oranges, and draw the world on it, and then cut it up and put it flat. What happens? Well, you can't do it. And you can't take a sphere and map it to 2D with complete accuracy. So we have different kinds of maps, different kinds of projections. Now, middle schoolers aren't quite ready for the math. I'm not quite ready for that math. That's pretty intense stuff. But they're going to get it. They see it. Again, hands-on. Let them start doing it. Let them start making the maps. And at the same time, we're now integrating the project with math. So that's our goal. Coherent curriculum, yeah. We'd like to basically have, across the board, the same approach to science. Montessori science in the classroom has been shelf materials. Science in the 1900s was very different. We were still talking about taxonomy more than anything. What are the new organisms that we see? Big concepts were happening for sure. At the same time, though, it was, if you look at our shelf materials for younger kids, it's parts of a plant, parts of a fish. Great stuff, but where's the questions? Where's the science of what happens if? Or how do I test this idea? So we want to bring that and start bringing it completely across the curriculum. Critical thinking and problem solving. Industry. It's amazing. When I used to be a software engineer, and the complaint in almost every company is, so I can't just give you a problem, go solve it. So there would be one particular, the lead engineer not only had to lead the project, but had to explain the project, because a lot of people didn't know how to approach the problem to solve it. Skills, oh my gosh, lists, measurement, metric system, the idea of, with the younger kids, volume, mass. And I've got middle schoolers that are struggling with the idea of mass versus weight, because it's really confusing. And in the English system, we use it interchangeably, in both systems, we use the idea of mass and weight interchangeably, because we live on this planet with this gravity, but it's not. So, creativity. I don't know how you teach that, but I think problem solving and challenge is certainly a good entrance to it. Cooperation and communication, that's the other thing we get from industry, is like, you get guys that are fighting as opposed to cooperating. Science is no longer a single person endeavor. It's done in teams. And if you're not talking, if you're not working well, you have a huge problem. You can double or even completely cripple a project with one or two people who aren't talking to you. I had a guy that wrote the driver that I was supporting for a graphics device. And it's like, brilliant guy. It's like, just tell me what the interface is going to be. Well, so lower grades, my idea is exposure, exposure, exposure. So the shelf materials, most of them are great. I want them to stay. I want to add to it. I was just talking to Elisa yesterday. Kids should be doing an experiment every week as one of their goals. Simple, you know. What happens? Well, there was a great one. The kid did a science fair a long time ago. He said, what happens if we grow a plant with milk instead of water? Right? Great question. So now, how do we turn that into an experiment? Well, we have to have your hypothesis. What do you think is going to happen? And you test for that. If it fails, then you've got a piece of information. I have some third graders that will begin crying if the experiment fails. So we've got to get, that's a whole other thing that caught me a little by surprise. In science, failure is as good as a success, right? So, so I'd like to be adding to that. Third grade, big ideas and begin projects. Things to do. We talk about change a lot. This is a great book, even for third graders. We talk about, we begin to talk about evolution, how life changes. Why does life change? What's the response? Kids will begin to talk about a reason for a change, a reason to have a certain trait. Darwin's birds are great. Short beaks, long beaks. Why? Okay. And the big hurdle with the younger kids is that the birds wanted to change so that they could get the grain or the whatever. So, and then come back to, no, it's not an individual will, it's a process. Fourth and fifth, 2-year theme. Easy. Well, geosphere and hydrosphere. The year of the ocean, the next year is the year of the earth. The 6th grade, we haven't split this out yet, but I'd like to, where the 6th graders can begin to talk, use a book. Most of them are reading well enough that they can begin, and we definitely use a middle school book. These are old, but still a lot, except for the biology ones. They're great books because they have highlights. So as we begin academic skills in middle school, but also in 6th grade, taking notes. These books work really well. It's got the things highlighted that you might want to take notes on. It's got a review at the end of the chapter. So for middle school, this is getting ready for high school without too much pain. You're not like throwing them in a book that has no support. Middle school is a 2-year cycle also, the biosphere and then physical sciences. This is a huge chunk of material. I have not ever gotten through it the way I wanted. I guess that's part of teaching. But I teach less taxonomy and more process. We go through life based on a timeline. I use this with the little kids too. The traditional Montessori lesson is the long black strip, and that starts with the Big Bang and goes up to the present. So modified that a little. We lay it out. We still start with the Big Bang, the formation of the universe, the galaxy, the solar system, the moon, and eventually Earth. 4.5 billion years to present. With the idea that, again, scale, we're not talking about with the little kids really getting ratio, but having this sense of scale. This is a 50-foot timeline, and by the time they've laid it all out, they get that it's been going on for a while, right? So that's Montessori classic, where we try to add in some modern science. This is an ocean-based curriculum. I tend to use it with upper L on the year we do the ocean. Our curriculum goals again. Standards. Okay. It puzzles me why science standards have been the last ones addressed in almost everybody's mind, except scientists and science teachers, of course. We use NGSS, National. Oops, sorry. Anyway, it's a group of science teachers and scientists. The standards are, they still address content, but they put content in the back seat. It's necessary, but not sufficient. You've got to have skills, thinking, and so they'll go through the biology standards. We'll talk about third grade, understanding that life changes. Maybe fourth or fifth grade, that life changes based on a process. Sixth grade, they begin, or whenever, they talk about evolution as the process. How does that work? All right, so that was science. Technology and engineering, we try to do project-based stuff. It works as an engagement tool. You can't beat it. Again, I have kids that building these bridges. It's like they will just be so focused and so excited. And then we do the test. Every bridge fails the first time. Never seen it not. And they go back and rebuild it. Okay, and they begin to understand an engineering process. Place-based. So this is something that the administration is supporting really well. Community partners. We live in a place that's extraordinary in terms of resources, both natural and man-made. We have 3 significant partners now. Gloucester Maritime, Salem Sound Coast Watch, and the Gulf of Maine Institute. So our ocean curriculum is covered. I'm still struggling to find a community partner for the geology and stuff like that, but totally believe it. So I want to give you an example. Real science in place. Last year, NOAA, if they get to survive, has tremendous education opportunities. And they, through the Gulf of Maine Institute, they have had schools build and launch surface current drifters, and even some subsurface current drifters. The idea here is to map the currents in the ocean. Right? In the Gulf of Maine, a lot of scientists suspect, with some evidence already, that the currents are changing significantly. This has significant impact on the life in the ocean, and so there's at least a dozen projects that want information on what's happening with currents. So we drop a little drifter, which is basically a float with sails on it, and the surface current carries it. It has a transponder. We watch it on satellite and give the information. So ours, let me see if this will work the way I want it. This was my final presentation to the Gulf of Maine. So I took this idea of real science. This is really just added it into our ocean in motion unit. Ocean in motion, tides, wind, currents, because the ocean's constantly moving, and that has implications for navigation, for history, everything. I guess it runs by itself. I'm sorry. All right, so we got hooked up with a cod researcher. Cod are declining even after NOAA cut off fishing on the banks almost entirely. I think actually completely entirely for cod. All right, and wanted to know what's happening. There's a couple theories. One is that the Gulf of Maine is warming. It's the fastest warming body of water on the planet, according to some scientists. 2 degrees already since the 1980s. And that's drawing warm water predators. Any of you that were kids, well, if you're as old as even close to me, the Cape didn't used to have great white sharks nearly as much. Now they're there almost all the time, right? And they tend to be warmer water predators, and they're coming up after seals. And so if warm water predators are coming up and eating the cod or the cod eggs, that's one theory why they're declining. Another is cod eggs float for the first 15, several weeks of their existence, and they float on surface currents, and then they drop out theoretically in really good places to spawn, to hatch and make baby cod. If the currents are changing, that's a problem, because if you drop them in an area that's not good for hatching, or that's in the middle of hungry predators, or no cover, there's a problem. So this guy wants to know, we're going to launch a drifter off Scituate and see where the current takes it. And we're going to mark it. He wants to know exactly what happens in 6 weeks. Where is that drifter? Because he's launched it in a spawn of cod eggs, right? Real science, real data, real important. He visited the school. This guy, his wife's a teacher, so he did this incredible presentation. He got it. He got it with the kids. Here's what we're doing. Where the cod used to spawn. So he brought all this to the kids. Here's why we're doing this. So the kids already excited about sort of building stuff, and we started with, can you make something float for 2 days? That's the basic. That's our first project. Can you make it float for 2 days with Hurricane Victor coming in, and Hurricane Corey? So they love that. Now they understand why we're doing it. Here's where they might drop out. So stage 1 is how we start a project. There's our brainstorm. I love this. It doesn't go away for a minute. Some of the kids said, well, we're going to send a diver down for 6 weeks. It's like, okay, and maybe a little robot, maybe a little, the creativity is, I realize here, I'm not sure we have to teach creativity. I think we just better leave it alone, because it's like, and then take the creativity and see what they can do with it. They had some amazing ideas. Does it float? I added, how green is it? There's one, this one floated for 2 days with no problem. Second stage has to float for 3 days. They have to make it on a budget, drifter bucks, right? Because that's the reality. You can't, unless you're NASA, well, even NASA's got a budget, right? So you don't get huge amounts of money always, and you still may be needing to, right? Problem. Another one that floats. This is a green one. This young woman's like, sure, that thing in the middle is an LED, which is our transponder. If it gets wet, particularly in salt water, it's going to fail. So the transponder had to be above water and not keep working. Green solution. We found later that the floats that Noah was using, those big styrofoam things, the woman at Salem Sound Coast Watch found an alternative. There are floats made from mushrooms that we're now using, and they will decay in a year, feed a lot of fish. So this young woman was right on target. Stage 2, here's the parts store. It's simple, but there's the drifter bucks. Model building, test, getting the light to life. An LED works with only one polarity. So that was a big thing, to figure that out. How do you keep it lit? So how do you attach it to the battery in such a way that with simple stuff and put it in the box so that it stays on? And how do you make it sure that it's going to be waterproof and not short out because of the salt water? The winners of the model, and that had to float, was actually towards late November that we got it into the pool. So now they had ice to contend with, and it went through a storm. A lot of them sank, but some of them stayed. Some of them floated, stayed lit. That's the real drifter without the sails. A simple float, and now once you get into the final project, one of the things that the STEM people say is use the kids' strength, okay? The marketing guy may be just as important as the engineer. We had some incredible artists. These were our sails. They were fully decorated, just gorgeous. Even had our number on it in case it landed. Gomi said to me, you're going to have to go get the drifter if it comes ashore. And I was like, Paris, Paris, Paris. Not quite, or Bermuda would have been good too. And there's our drifter. Well, all right. That's a movie of the guys, of the actual mass fisheries guys launching it. And it went and went. There's the satellite track of our drifter. This part up in here was during a hurricane, or maybe it was a nor'easter, I forget. It ended up, this is about 200 miles northeast of Bermuda. We think it went into the gyre, the Atlantic gyre, and that it's probably was trapped there forever.
The other fascinating bit of the track was it's off up to the upper left, but it almost didn't make it around the tip of Cape Cod, around Race Point, and then got caught in the Pollock Rip channel down below Chatham and went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth for quite a while, and we were all like,
And that was, so at 6 weeks, he got his data where the Codex fell, okay? And
the only reason that it stopped, we figure it stopped on, it was launched on December 14th or 18th, and they turned off their receivers on August 31st, and it was still transmitting on August 30th. So
right. They had to see
it went
the
way
transfer
further
data.
than anybody's.
Yeah. So I didn't get to go to Paris.
And our competitors were all colleges and high schools.
Yep. We have another drifter that I just got word is reserved for us for next year, because next year's the ocean year again. We'll do the project again with a new set of kids. I don't know which scientists we're going to get hooked up with, but if nothing else, the scientists at Gomi are very cool. Let's see if I can do this right. How am I doing for time? Oh, no. Okay. We had the deal we made with Gomi was they get our curriculum. That's posted now. So we're trying to build, I'm on the board their editorial board now, but and we're trying to build a library of projects, ocean projects, that would be available to everyone. So the partnership goes both ways. They love this. They court headmasters. They really do. Come have lunch, come, you know, because not all headmasters are quite as dedicated as ours, and that's important because one of the things is this community and this administration supports this faculty in ways that don't always happen.
Quick story on that. They had an evaluator from somewhere, the government, call to talk about the project, and she was asking me, she started asking me about the going out and the field trips and all of that, and she said, well, don't you get a lot of pushback on that? And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, aren't parents uncomfortable with their kids just going off somewhere with a teacher to do something? Don't you have transportation problems, don't you? And the more she asked the questions, the more I realized. I finally said, so you've been interviewing a lot of public school district principals? And she said, yeah, you're the first Montessori principal I've talked to. I said, yeah, okay, come on down and visit. You know, I said, we're lucky that we have a self-selecting parent body that support this sort of thing.
All right, let's see. The current project, it got a little derailed. I had to have some surgery this year, and so I'm hoping to go, not next week, but the week after. We've been talking about climate change a little bit. In middle school, some schools now are allowing the teaching, and some states are even beginning to almost mandate it, not encourage it, not mandate. Oregon just passed a law or requirement for their educated books. The books can't say maybe anymore. If you look at our weather and climate book, it's old, in the 90s, and it said there might be our climate might be changing, okay? And that's, of course, what a lot of people want to, that's the worst case they want to hear, but that's changing. Oregon, you have to say the science. We're trying to do the same. But we made a map of Beverly, a 3D model, and a map of Salem. And Salem Sound Coast Watch has a really good, inexpensive, this guy made it from a camera, a game camera, and a projector. It will read the model and then project topo lines. I don't know if you can see that very well. Yeah. Those lines are projected onto the model. So now we can actually say, determine that this is the water, and then this would be 20 feet, 40, 80, 60, whatever, right? So the kids can see that. Then you can go in and say, reset sea level for plus 20 feet. What happens to our model? Well, you'd be surprised what the communities that now are like Venice, right? So the streets are no longer streets. So so this is important stuff. I'll probably try to do more next year. They're really good, and I'll try to stay healthy. But the kids also love it, and you can actually say, this is how science models the problem. Right? What if the sea level rises 20 feet? What if it rises 40? I mean, the current NOAA, some people at NOAA are estimating 100 feet by 2100. So that's, nobody knows. But they get to see some fairly complex modeling. They don't see the math and stuff. But they begin to get the idea. And then when we talk about modeling processes, we can talk about the complexity involved. And practical life. We have a greenhouse. It got moved out front, so it's sort of a showcase, and it's a great little greenhouse. take the younger kids out and plant. That's what I've been doing for the past couple weeks, planting peas, lettuce, planting. And so we're ready, Friday we'll talk about, so what is a seed? What happens in a seed? And so we did a brainstorm already. They all thought, well, the apple is protection for the seed. And so we got into a great discussion. Well, what else is it? What happens with an apple? Well, people eat apples. Animals, eat apples. Why? Why would that happen? And they say, well, this is a plant's way of spreading the seeds, right? And one way is to have animals eat it and carry the seed. And what are other ways? And they came up with all the solutions that I would have stood up there and talked to them about. Wind, water. And then the last one was a real head scratcher. Well, some seeds are sticky and they stick to, dog's fur and stuff like, So it was just amazing conversation. We also are doing some mechanics. I'm personally interested in, can we passively heat a greenhouse to keep it from freezing? At a previous school, I did it in a pretty warm year, to be fair, and grew herbs. It didn't freeze all year. So we had 3 50-gallon barrels of water as our heat mass, and collects it off the roof. There's an overflow pipe. The middle school, a group of middle schoolers helped me build it. The new mechanicals are, we have had solar panels donated to us. Really nice. They'll be in, I hope, by the end of May. We've got to dig some holes, put them in. They'll run a pump, just a little tiny pump, that will move the water through fins to spread the heat. I mean, one of the things fine with heat with mass is, sure, you can heat that water, but will the rest of the greenhouse freeze and the things near the water not freeze? So if we can just move it around a little bit. So that's been great. And also we were composting for a while. It's a huge and very complex. Students do their jobs, they try, but if you have something like compost and it doesn't get done, so we're now using lacquer. Yeah, but in the meantime, our middle schoolers did some research. There's a composting guide, pretty good one. And that's it. I just wanted to say one thing. I got this book a couple days ago. This is Why Scientists Disagree About Global Warming. Guess who sent it? There's a thing called the Freedom Foundation, right? Which is a strange name for this. So this is going out to science teachers all over the country. It's well done. It's incredibly inaccurate, but there is a problem in science and in science teaching, is that there's a disinformation. Not only do people not understand because maybe we're not doing our jobs, but has anybody seen the movie Merchants of Doubt? Oh, see it if you can. It's mostly about the big tobacco corporations and how they set up a system of disinformation to convince people that smoking wasn't dangerous. How many lives it cost is another question. The same thing's happening, of course, with this. This is now systematized. This is systematized by several think tanks. And so we have our work cut out for us. Questions? Anything?
Thank you.
So thinking about that makes me think that there's a good opportunity here to teach the kids how to, on their own, evaluate different sources of information.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I don't know how to do it with the younger kids. be thoughtful, I guess is the big thing, is teach them to think. Middle school is thinking about teaching or using Inherit the Wind, the play. This, I didn't work out, but next year? Awesome, good, because that's perfect with the bio. And then I would talk about, and she would talk about the Scopes trial and the politics, and in science we'll be talking about evolution, creationism, and we already, I mean, we do every second year we talk about why don't we teach creationism, right? Because this is the big, their advocation, and now politically there's this huge push that you have to teach, it's called creation science, misnomer, but next to evolution. Well, that seems pretty reasonable, right? We want all points of view. Well, no, we don't teach this because it's not science, right? It is a myth, creation myths. We talked about creation myths. There's some incredible beauty in creation myths. And whether you find it in that or not, that's fine. And we don't talk about the truth value of it. The creation myth is true or not on your belief. It is not provable, right? Therefore, it's not science. So that's the big issue we talk about. If you want to evaluate something with science, there are things you can't evaluate. And the existence of God cannot be evaluated with science. That belongs in another sphere. It's beautiful, I mean, I think, but regardless. So then we can bring, I don't know if I'd actually bring this book out for the kids, but we can bring the idea of like, so creationism talks about, ultimately the rests on God did it. Fine, maybe, that's all good, but it's not a hypothesis. It's not a testable thing. It's not empirical. There's no way to investigate it. So it's not a judgment about whether creation is good or bad. It's a judgment of it's not science, right? It's not this way of looking at the world. It's a different way of looking at it. And we need lots of different ways, again, but I don't mind the kids doing that. But there are so many political decisions ahead of us that informed citizens need to be talking about and understanding. And if we don't have that, then Naomi Klein's book, forgot the name of it, was amazing because she talked about how the different media gave equal time to different points of view about climate change. Okay, but and it's fine to say some people are denying it. You do what you do, but it's not a point of view. It's a measurable reality. And if you see a thermometer and if it's warmer, it's warmer. So, and that's beginning to shift in a lot of the media to say, yes, this is an established, there are established facts to support this, it's science. Now,
This Changes Everything. Is the name of
oh,
the book.
thank you, yes, exactly. A really great book. A little bit of a, it's not an exciting read, but it's an important read. We need to build I think basically the thinking. Think about it. What is being said? Who's saying it and why? Where's the data? Where's the evidence? Because that's what we talk about in science. And then, okay, so there is data, there is evidence. The Gulf of Maine is getting warmer. Sea level's all up 2 feet in some places. So that's significant. What does that mean? Well, at the very least, you're not going to buy shorefront property if you want to have it in 30 or 40 years. But it means, like Salem, working with the state university, has already building plans. What happens when the sea level rises? Do we mitigate it with seawalls? Do we mitigate it with wetlands? You know, because there's evidence about how those work. And Salem Sound Coast Watch is really involved in that. But who's going to know if we're not thinking about it? Thank you.